Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rin. I talk about books and knitting and other stuff, mostly books, here. Today I am just coming with a very chill reading update. I read some books and I just want to chat about them. I don't think that monthly wrap-ups are for me. I've tried to do them in the past on TikTok and on here, and they just never really work out super well. I think the problem is, like, sometimes I just read a book just to, like, try it, and then I end up, like, not having thoughts on the book. Usually it's, like, a book that's been super hyped up and everybody rates it, like, 4 or 5 stars, and I thought it was, like, just okay. And I don't really have a reason why I think it's just okay. It just like didn't hit me like that. And so I feel weird talking about it because I'm like, I don't know what to say. This book is just okay. So I think I'll just do reading updates whenever I feel like I have enough books that I want to chat about. So I have 5 books to talk about today. I read most, maybe all of them in September, but they're not all the books that I read in September. I guess if you want to see everything and then like a rating, you can follow me on Goodreads. We can be friends on Goodreads. Because I do like track everything there for my own self. But these are all books that I would like highly recommend, so I'm only really talking about books that I really enjoyed and I think more people should read them. So yeah, let's just start. The first book I have is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. I talked about this book in my video on the human condition, but I just wanted to talk about it more. I guess I don't have a physical copy because I checked it out from the library, and I'm genuinely considering buying a physical copy to have, which is something I do not do. I'm not really one of those people who checks out from the library and then buys copies just because I just don't like having that many books to begin with. I only have like one shelf that I like to keep my books on. Anyways, I usually don't buy the books that I read from the library. I'm pretty good at judging whether or not I feel like I need to own this book or if I can go from the library. But this time I was wrong. I did not think I was going to like this book that much, but I ended up absolutely loving it. So it is a Belgian novel. It's translated from French. It was originally published in the 90s, and then I think it just recently got translated into English, and it's kind of had like a bit of a resurgence moment going on. It is a speculative dystopian book about these 40 women. They are trapped living in bunkers underground. They're guarded by these men with whips, and they do not remember how they got to these cages or why they are there. They only have like vague recollections of their previous life, which is like normal society. The book centers on one of the women who is actually a child. She's the only child. All of the other women are grown, and so she doesn't have any memories of before the bunker because she was too young, but they all do. And so you follow her as she's growing up. You see like her feeling very excluded from the other women. They all know about normal society. She doesn't know anything but the bunkers. And so she's quite different from all of them. They have certain longings for privacy and for food and for men and love, and she doesn't know any of that, and so she feels very excluded from them. It's a very human novel. It raises questions of what does it mean to be human? Are you still a human if you live separately from society, if you don't live within societal constructs? And the main character is kind of questioning that throughout the story. I wouldn't say that this book is like a character study, but seeing the main character's thoughts and like her feeling and her like learning how to name her emotions and the world around her was so interesting. It's a very like thought-provoking read, and there isn't much of a story. So if you like your books to be plot heavy, or if you like it to be more definitive and have a ending, a conclusion, this is not the book for you. It's much more of a thought experiment for Harpman and for us as readers. So if you just want to curl up with a book and contemplate humanity, this book is for you. I have 2 quotes to share. I was forced to acknowledge too late, much too late, that I too have loved, that I was capable of suffering, and that I was human after all. I thought it was unfair, and then I understood that alone and terrified, anger was my only weapon against the horror. The next book I have is Shuggie, Bain by Douglas Stuart. This book is set in Glasgow in like the 1980s-ish, so when Thatcher was in charge in England. It follows a young boy named Shuggie as he's growing up with his alcoholic mother, Agnes. It starts with him living with Agnes and Shug, his dad, as well as his 2 half-siblings and Agnes's parents. They all live together in tenement housing in Glasgow. Overall, I just think this book is really well constructed. The arch of the story and the way each piece connects with each other is what makes this such a beautiful book. We really start in the 90s with Shuggie living alone as a teenager, and then we go back to him as a toddler. And so you know throughout the whole story that he's going to end up alone as a teenager, but you don't know how or why or where everybody else is. And so the whole time you're reading, you're wondering how he got to that point. It's a very interesting way to frame the story because it focuses so much more on Agnes, Shuggie's mom, and her struggles with alcoholism and how it like affects the entire family. But you see it through the eyes of Shuggie. She's a very like proud, beautiful, alluring woman. She's always dressed up and takes a lot of pride in her appearance. And that kind of contrasted with her addiction to alcohol and kind of the dirty disgustingness that goes in with that makes her a very, very complex and interesting character. And then watching her through Shuggie just breaks your heart. The story also touches on queerness. Shuggie is gay, and he's kind of very visibly gay, and so the characters exclude him, tease him, and just like destroy his sense of self in their bigotry towards him. It's also really connected to the time and the struggles of people living in Glasgow during that time. The majority of them are living in tenement houses, where they're sharing, bathrooms and kitchens with people. They're living off of subsidies from the government, waiting for that payment to come through. And so they're struggling with poverty, as well as Agnes spends all of the money on alcohol. There's not enough left for food at the end of the week. So it just kind of paints a picture of the time and the people during that time. A lot of them buy like from the catalog on credit, and so that like detail is such like it's such a way of immersing you into the story. I was talking about this book with my friend and I was describing it, and she said it sounded like A Little Life, which was funny because I hadn't thought about it before, but I do think it's quite similar in a lot of ways, with the exploration of trauma and queerness. They're different in quite a distinct way. I think A Little Life really focuses a lot on big traumatic events and these like shockingly horrific things that are happening to these characters. And for me personally, it overpowered the characters and their relationships, and so it made it harder for me to connect with them. Whereas I think in Shuggie Bain, it's a lot softer. There's a lot more buildup and like nuance in the pain that Stuart inflicts on these characters. As an example, one of the most heartbreaking parts in the story is when a specific time when Shuggie is bullied by some school students. And with the buildup of the story, you know what Shuggie wants most in the world, his deepest insecurities, and it makes the bullying much more poignant. And so while bullying is awful, it's not as intense as some of the other traumatic things that even happen in this book, but it's so cutting and just heartbreaking because you know how much it hurts Shuggie. And so it's subtle in that kind of way. I think if some of the shock horror events were too much for you in A Little Life, but you also want a very sad and intense story, you should read this one. I have 2 quotes. Sadness made for a better house guest. At least it was quiet, reliable, consistent. Flames are not just the end, they are also the beginning, for everything that you have destroyed can be rebuilt. From your own ashes, you can grow again. The next one that I have is Paradise by Toni Morrison. This is a book that I don't know how much I have to say on it, but I feel the need to include it anyways because I did really, really enjoy it. I struggle a lot with Toni Morrison because her writing, she just like does not hold your hand throughout the story. You have to get up and figure it out yourself. You have to focus, you have to pay attention to every single line, or you are going to miss something, and you are going to miss something important, and then the book will be meaningless. So I'm a little dumb, so I struggle with it a little bit. But once I really got into this book and I did some like reading about it, like after each chapter I would read a summary of the chapter to make sure that I understood what had happened and that I hadn't missed anything that was key to the overall story, which I think was really, really helpful, and I'll probably do with all of her books going forward. But anyways, this book is about an all-black town that was established by some former slaves. They were excluded from other black towns after slavery had ended, so they had joined together to make their own town. Outside of this town is a convent. No nuns live there anymore. It takes place in the 80s, I think. And a group of eccentric women live there. And the book starts with a group of men going to the convent and murdering all of the women there. The first line is iconic. They shoot the white girl first. With the rest, they can take their time. And so throughout the rest of the book, you're following different characters from the convent and from the town itself. You're actually following women from the convent and women from the town. And it kind of pieces the puzzles of how all of these women ended up at the convent and how these men ended up attacking them. I really got into this book around like the 60-70% mark, there's a woman, like each chapter is named after a different woman who's narrating, and the chapter on Patricia is so good. It really fills in a lot of the history of the town and the people and the families and why everything is happening. This book is just absolutely wild, which is part of the reason why I struggle to talk about it. I think you just have to read it. It speaks a lot about racism and about colorism, also about like the insular nature of communities and how being so insular is really damaging and feeds into bad loops. You see, I can't even talk about this book. I don't know what to say. Read this book. Read Toni Morrison. Next up is Shame by Annie Ernaux. This one I annotated the shit out of, and I loved. Translated from the French by Tanya Leslie, I think. Yes. And I think this book was originally published in the 90s. It's a memoir fiction blend. It starts also with an insane line. My father tried to kill my mother one Sunday in June in the early afternoon. It starts with this traumatic event that Ernaux remembers and talks about how it and other moments in her life led her to feel consistent and constant shame. She touches a lot on trauma and the impact and how pervasive it has been throughout her life. She weaves in themes of religion, of societal expectation, of poverty, all into how she has felt shame. She grew up in a small town in Normandy, and so there was a lot of gossiping in the town. There was a lot of sticking to societal guidelines. If you went outside the guidelines, shameful, and how religion was kind of like an omnipresent force that dictated a lot of people's lives in ways they didn't understand, and how Catholicism and shame are so deeply entwined. She spoke a lot about poverty. She was very poorer than some of the other people in her town, and the shame that came with that. I just found it so profoundly relatable, so beautifully written, and just gorgeous. I really need to read more Ernaux. I don't know which one to pick up next. I have The Years as a physical copy, but then I read more about her other books, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should get that one. Maybe I should read that one. So I want to read them all. She also speaks a lot about memory. And I was watching an interview that she did after I finished this book, and she speaks about her writing and how she relies solely on memory. And so her books kind of become a blend of memoir and fiction, and like you can see it throughout this book because she recounts trying to remember certain events, and she's like, do I remember this being there? Was it actually there, or do I just want it to be there? Yeah, I could probably read about a dozen quotes, but I will stick to 2. Shame became a new way of living for me. I don't think I was even aware of it. It had become part of my own body. The shame will never cease, and that it will only be followed by more shame. And the last book and my most recent read is Stoner by John Williams. I loved this book. I loved it so much. I did not think that I was going to like it. Everybody said that this book was boring. It's not boring. It's amazing. The writing is so gorgeous. It's about a man at the start of the 1900s. He enrolls in University of Missouri, He's only there because his parents, who are farmers, have told him to go. While there, he takes an English course as a requirement and becomes enraptured with literature. He changes his major and becomes a professor and leaves behind his farming life. You follow him through his entire life teaching at University of Missouri. Him making wrong choices and him living just a very simple life. This book is very, very atmospheric. Not just in the setting, which, yes, in the setting, in the school, in the where he is, but also like the feeling of being there, the heat that you feel in a classroom. You just felt so immersed in the story and immersed like in the university and in his life. So the writing is just absolutely standout. I feel like if you're gonna have a more plotless book, you have to have gorgeous writing, and like this just does it. It talks a lot about living a simple life and if you can live a pointless life. If Stoner has lived a pointless life. And it all kind of ties back to that theme. Because another theme is academia, the staying power of literature. It's kind of combined with the theme of simple living. Like, is it worth it to just study endlessly in your life? Is that a well-lived life if you just study and gain knowledge for the sake of gaining knowledge? Stoner is such an interesting character. I feel like there's a lot of moments in the book where he was like, this is who I am as a person. And I'm still really grappling with them to truly understand him as a character. Though I will say I found him very, very frustrating at moments because he just didn't seem to really take action to really move his life in any concrete direction and to take ownership of his life. And a lot of the characters were like that too. Which is very interesting to read about, that you have to kind of be your own hero and you have to push your life the way you want it to be. Which again ties back to simple living. It's also a very sad but elegant novel. The storytelling is just superb above all else. There's a couple quotes that I adore. I can't say my favorite quote because that would be spoilery. But there's one that just moves me. Mr. Shakespeare speaks to you across 300 years, Mr. Stoner. Do you hear him? Just a perfect quote for him. That is all that I have to update you on today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, consider subscribing or liking, or maybe even leaving me a comment. I wish you guys all the best reading in the next month. So yeah, bye!